2023 was pretty bad. Some much-anticipated movies fell flat at the box office, and TV wasn't much better. However, there were a few bright spots on the media landscape, and I want to call out 3 titles: a movie, a miniseries, and a season of television that you can watch right now. No prep, no backstory, no reading, no extended universe of lore. Just 3 things that you can watch that make me oddly hopeful at the end of a pretty so-so year. First up is Tetris by Apple TV, which is a little awkward since I just dropped a video talking about how they throw big money at big directors for little effect, but this time they've done something very different than that. They've put a reasonable amount of money into adapting the true story of how the game Tetris made it out of the Soviet Union into the hands of gamers all around the world. The story, it's complicated, and I don't want to spoil anything, so instead, let's talk about the main character, Hank Rogers, who is a real person, of course. Hank is a small video game publisher living in Japan in the late 1980s. He notices people crowding around a booth at a software convention and discovers that they're playing a new game from the Soviet Union, of all places.
What's it called?
Tetris.
Tetris. I don't get it.
He immediately understands the draw of what he's seeing, and he makes a deal to secure the rights to publish the game in Japan. The story starts to unfold at that point, as Hank needs 3 things. He's got to firm up the rights to publish the game. He has to convince a partner like Nintendo to help produce and distribute the game. And he needs to get the money to buy the rights as well as pay his employees to package the game into some kind of shippable product. Hank is able to do all of this because he knows what he has, not just as a business proposition, but as a gamer. Here, let's have him explain.
It's nothing like Go. It's in a completely different league.
Heard that line before.
Okay, fine, but Eddie, I played Tetris for 5 minutes. Yeah? I still see falling blocks in my dreams. This game isn't just addictive, it stays with you. It's poetry, art, and math all working in magical synchronicity. It's the perfect game.
Okay, kids, you see that right there? That is what we call passion. You see, Hank's passion drives most of the events of the movie, from his negotiations with the British media syndicate who claims to have the rights to the game, to convincing his wife to mortgage their home as collateral for the deal. He also gets to do things that you like to see happen in movies, like sneak his way into a meeting with the president of Nintendo to show him the game, because he knows once he sees it, he'll be hooked.
Not too bad.
This is the kind of movie Hollywood used to make a lot. A mid-budget picture with a story you can wrap your head around and characters that you either like or hate, as appropriate, with perfect casting all around. The stakes are worth calling out in this because it's not about, will the world get Tetris? We know the world is going to get Tetris. The Tetris is so popular, they even made a movie about it. But the stakes of the movie actually are, is our hero, who has put so much at risk, will he be rewarded for his sacrifice and then go on to make sure that the actual creator of the game is fairly compensated? Or will fortune and success go to the smug British conglomerate or even the Soviet Union? Now, these stakes are relatively small. They're very personal, and I gotta tell you, they are way more engaging than any number of big-budget films this year that had the fate of the world on the line. Hank is a really relatable character with very understandable problems and a wonderfully charismatic performance. Exactly the kind of thing that we used to expect to see in our movies. And if Hank Rogers' passion got us the game Tetris, I gotta wonder, what would happen if you had a whole slew of passionate people working together on something bigger? What you might get is my second pick of the year, which is called The Offer on Paramount+, a 10-part dramatization miniseries about the making of The Godfather. Now, this story is loaded with passionate characters. You've got Mario Puzo, who wrote the original novel and is flush with its success, Francis Ford Coppola, who wants to bring the great Italian-American story to the screen and get himself out of movie jail, and then there's Albert Ruddy, the producer of the film, who you probably haven't heard of. I know I hadn't really heard much about him either. I knew the other two, but Ruddy was new. You see, he was an analyst at the Rand Corporation before finding it too tedious and decided to make his way to Hollywood with the help of a friend. He gets his big break one day when he riffs on an idea in a meeting with television executives for a sitcom about a bunch of POWs in a German camp during World War II. That's right, the guy who created Hogan's Heroes was the executive producer of The Godfather. Now, why would he leave a lucrative job in television for the movies? Well, again, let's have him explain.
No, the excitement.
the thrill. I mean, did you hear them at the end?
Yes, there was a great ending.
No, it's not just about the ending. It's about the experience of it. You got 300 people all watching the same thing, reacting in real time, just feeding off each other. You can't get that experience in television.
Say it with me, kids. Passion, drive, motivation. So how does he make it into the movies? Well, in classic Hollywood fashion, he lies his way onto the lot at Paramount, he navigates his way to the head of the studio, and tells him he wants a job. And that studio head was Robert Evans. People talk about larger-than-life personalities in Hollywood, but most of them pale in comparison to Evans. Look, you can go Google his resume if you want, but the important thing for The Offer is that Evans is as passionate a filmmaker as any actor, writer, director, or crew member on the set.
And I watched my first movie instead. The Adventures of Robert Hood.
Errol Flynn, great movie.
Oh, yeah. I went in, the lights go down, audience gets quiet, reverent, like we're in a place of worship. Then the projector starts to hum. That magical beam of light, picking up all those swirls of smoke in the air. It was like another planet, man. And then, poof, wham. There's Robin Hood. Larger than life, swinging from tree to tree, shooting arrows through the ends of other arrows. It was, and everybody glued to the screen. It was magic. Real magic. I mean, I knew right that this was my calling. That darkened movie theater became my church. Look at us now, Peter. Look at us now. We're like these guys of the world. Because we don't just worship at the temple, no. We're the high priests. We put the magic on the screen.
And that passion fills out not only his motivation in the story, but a lot of the conflict as well. Evans is a mentor to Ruddy, giving him encouragement and guidance when he needs it, but he isn't shy about pushing back when he disagrees about a decision for the film. Now, The Offer isn't a showcase of groundbreaking special effects or innovative storytelling, but what drew me to it were a lot of the same feelings that I got from watching Tetris. It's a solid story with relatable and understandable characters with clear motives that often put them at odds with one another. Now, people being at odds with one another is a form of conflict, which is interesting because the audience doesn't know how the conflict is going to resolve, even in a story where you know what's ultimately going to happen. For example, did you know that Robert Evans was opposed to Al Pacino being cast in The Godfather? And not just like a little bit opposed, but like...
Stop, Bob. Just watch him. Pacino's really good.
Cut it! Read my lips. That shrimp never gets the part.
It's just started. He's a beautiful actor.
Hey, director, take a visual cue. Doesn't get this part. Give me some movie star choices. Redford, O'Neill, Jimmy Caan. Anybody here besides me realizes picture needs to be a hit. Before I forget. Ruddy, maybe you could explain to me how Al Pacino has pages and I f***ing don't!
And even though we know that Pacino will be cast in the movie, the conflict itself is interesting. This happens again and again in the story. There's some massive roadblock put up in front of the characters that will blow up the whole production, and even though you know the movie will get made, you're still wondering how on earth is it going to happen? Did you know that key crew members conspired against Francis Ford Coppola and Ruddy so that they could steal their respective jobs? Or that the Mafia, the real one, was opposed to the making of the movie, and they would have made it impossible to actually film in New York. Or that Paramount's corporate owner decided mid-production that they wanted out of the movie business altogether and tried selling the studio, and yet the movie was made. How? Well, I was watching the show over the summer, and it was around that time that the latest Indiana Jones movie came out, which did not do very well. And I was thinking, while watching The Offer, about how the original Indiana Jones movies were collaborations between Lucas and Spielberg. And I was thinking about how Star Wars was also a huge collaboration between Lucas's vision, but he had an enormous team of very talented individuals who all came together to make the original trilogy. And that's what clicked in my head finally when watching The Offer. The show makes a decision not to show you any depictions of the actual Godfather movie. You have actors who are cast as Al Pacino and Marlon Brando and James Caan and others. We see people's reaction shots of watching The Godfather, but we don't see the movie itself. And I don't think it's because we've all seen The Godfather or they don't want actors having to pantomime through these classic scenes. I think it's because what this show is really about is a bunch of very talented people who have a lot of passion but different visions. And the ways that they were all able to come together, including working through a lot of conflict, to make the greatest movie ever. My third recommendation is also on Paramount Plus, and it is the first time in a long time that my wife and I had appointment television, watching new episodes of Picard Season 3. Now, I know I told you didn't have to have seen anything for these recommendations, and that's mostly true here. Weirdly, there is very, very, very little of the first 2 seasons of the show that you need to know, and honestly, you can just go in cold. It'll be fine. Although I do recommend having seen at least a few episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, just to get the vibe of the characters. Now, in case you haven't figured it out, the theme of this year's recommendation list is passion. The kind of passion that lights up a young man's eyes when he's telling you his dreams, whether it's making a video game, or a movie, or producing a season of television. Hey, Ryan Johnson, way to subvert my expectations. Yes, the passionate individual I want to talk about now is Terry Matalas. There's only 3 things you need to know about Terry Matalas. First, he wrote a Star Trek comic book. Second is he was the executive producer in Picard Season 3. And the third, he loves Star Trek. I know he does, and it's not just from interviews and social media. I know it because of how much time and attention went into every reverent detail of the production of this show. Just after the final episode, I caught this YouTube video about how there were like 70 or 80 Easter eggs throughout the show, and I thought, oh, wow. I mean, I saw a few in the first episode, but I didn't catch anywhere near that many. 70 or 80, that's so much. And then I started watching, and I realized, no. There were that many Easter eggs just in the last episode. And before you ask, no, I'm not talking about member berries. What I'm talking about are Easter eggs, the tiny little thoughtful details of the production that enhance the larger story, but aren't there as a substitute for the story. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details of the season because I want you to enjoy the particulars, but I do want to talk about the overall feeling of the show, which came up in episode after episode after episode throughout the entire run of the season. Do you remember that time in Star Trek when the Enterprise was outmatched and so they had to hide in a nebula or an asteroid field or something, and the crew had to figure out how to repair the ship or navigate or maybe turn off the energy draining alien thing? But how everyone had their own part in the story. Every crew member had a role to play, and they put aside whatever personal nonsense they were dealing with because it was life or death situation with hundreds of lives at risk. And then when they got out of the nebula or the asteroid field, or they turned the tables on the baddie, and then you felt really great because you had seen the crew all come together in a noble way to accomplish something that they couldn't have done alone. Yeah, that's called Star Trek, and Terry Matalas knows it. He knows a lot of other things that we think of when we think of Star Trek, and he went and did them too. Forgive me if I'm overstating things here, but the overall sense that I got from this show and from the behind-the-scenes material I've seen is that Matalas and a lot of other people involved in this have a lot of reverence for Star Trek, and that they thought of themselves more as custodians for it. You know, there have been a lot of other shows in recent years headed by people who didn't have this kind of respect for the source material. They were given money and authority to bring another IP to the big screen, and instead of treating it with the respect it deserved, they paid it a lot of lip service and then went and kind of did whatever thing they wanted to do instead. But the people who made Picard Season 3 did something really, really impressive, which was to advance the original timeline forward in a deeply satisfying way. Without spoiling anything, they created plenty of new characters, each of which has distinct personality and real reasons for being in the story. They elevated and fleshed out minor characters from the original run of the show, extrapolating out what their relationship would have been with the core characters. And of course, he brought back the original cast of The Next Generation and did an amazing job showing what these people would have been like over the next 25 years. Now, I was a little skeptical at the time, but I'm not afraid to say, when watching this show, I turned to my wife on more than one occasion and I said, yes, this person, this is the same character 25 years later. This is not a reimagining. This is not a reboot. This is the same character I knew from a long time ago. I didn't know you could actually do that. And I think that's what I'm really saying with these 3 seemingly unrelated titles this year. I didn't know they could still do this. I didn't know you could make me like and root for a character so hard so fast. I didn't know you could have a story about a lot of people with passionate perspectives and unique voices all arguing and fighting for what they believe without having to devolve into stupid personal squabbles. And I didn't know that we had people who wanted to be the steward of an imagined world and make something bigger than themselves, instead of remaking it into their own thing. So, I guess what I'm saying is, as we head into 2024, keep it up.